Hey YouTube, Brandon Ascari here, coming at you with another great and awesome episode of Ascari Digital's Content Creator Academy, and today we're going to be talking about how to film a realistic fight scene. So first, let's take a look, watch me get my butt kicked, and then we'll go in and talk about how I did it. So, enjoy. Wow, I have to say, for getting my butt kicked like that, I'm not bruised at all. I heal quickly. But for those of you who don't know, before I got into YouTube, I used to train to be a professional wrestler many years ago. If you're not familiar with what that is, it goes a little something like this. Ascari Digital's Content Creator Academy is gonna run wild on you, brother. Yeah. Okay, all kidding aside, that is actually what I used to do, was train to be in wrestling. That's just a goofy adaptation of an 80s promo. But there are a lot of things important in wrestling that correlates to fight choreography. The way I got started in filmmaking was actually by a friend who invited me to do a fight scene in their short film back in high school because they knew that I was into wrestling. So one actually correlated in the other, and that's how I started my career. So let's talk about how I did that fight scene. Well, first, let's break it down and talk about how we would choreograph it. So the way the fight scenes work is actually very similar to a story that you're trying to tell, dramatically or whatever. And by that, I mean that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Similar to what you would actually see in a wrestling match. We simply tell that story through fighting. And the way that we would do that is basically, in the beginning, somebody's winning. In the middle, the longest part, the other person is winning. And then at the end, the other person comes back and triumphantly takes victory. So you can think of that simplistically as the beginning, the middle, and the end. So whoever's winning in the beginning wins at the end, and the person in the middle has most of the fight scene to themselves. So taking a look at the fight scene example that we did, you'll see that in the beginning, the person who attacked me is winning. They grab me by the neck and they throw me off the chair. And then the middle starts when I reverse with the elbows and the backhand and kick them into the wall and, throw their head over here, pick them up. And then at the end, they reverse, they get out of it with a headlock, they clock me in the face and knock me down and then kick me in the face again. So you can see right there that that was the beginning, the middle, and the end told in a very basic form of a wrestling story. So that's how we cover the basic storytelling aspect to doing a fight scene. Now, how do we actually film it? Well, I recommend doing about 3 to 4 moves at a time in a sequence and break the fight up into many sequences. Unless you're a professionally trained martial artist or somebody who just is really naturally gifted at this, it's going to be really difficult without spending months and months and months of practicing the choreography over and over again to actually pull it off effectively. So if we're trying to do this in a somewhat short amount of time, what I recommend doing is, say, if your beginning fight scene is, okay, person 1 throws a punch, then another punch, and then the other person ducks and throws a punch, and then they do more after that, I would stop after that little chunk and do punch, punch, buh, and then that's your first sequence. Then what you're going to want to do is film that from as many different ways as possible. Every angle you can get. Put the camera over here, over there, down here, up there, wherever you can. Extreme close-ups, mediums, wide shots, reactions, whatever you want. Get as many angles as you can. And then you're going to move into the next sequence. So if the next sequence from this is, okay, the other person comes in with a punch, you block it and come in with an elbow, and they dodge and they put you in a chokehold, and then you elbow them a couple of times. That could be your next sequence. Film that from every angle and then move on from there. Now there's a trick to making this go really smoothly, and that trick is you always start off the next sequence with the last move from the first sequence. So remember, the first sequence was punch, punch, buh. So you're going to start off the next sequence with brr before you go into block elbow, and from there you keep going. Reason being is you need that momentum from the last angle to flow through into the next one, because if not, you're going to notice that if you just start here and then go like this and that, you're going to have a weird little jump cut in there that's not going to make sense. So whenever we're filming a fight scene, we always start the next sequence with the last move from the first sequence to give us a natural flow to go into the next sequence and make it smooth and like everything's okay. And that's a tip that's really important to making sure that everything goes smoothly when you're editing. If not, you're going to notice that the fight scene just looks jumpy every 3 or 4 moves when you start the next sequence, and we don't want that. So when we're talking about camera angles, this is actually the most important part to making this look realistic, right? Because if you see something where a punch is coming and I react to this, it doesn't look like the guy hit me. What do you want? Oh, look at that. I'm faking it for you just to make it as good as I possibly can, but it's not working. So you need to think about where the camera is and what is the move that you're doing. For instance, the camera, obviously, is right there. I am right here. To make a hit look realistic, you need the fist or the kick or whatever to pass in between where the camera is and the subject of who's getting struck in this fight scene. So for instance, if I wanted to make this look realistic, I would turn sideways and then do it like that. And then it would make my fist come past the camera, and if I react at the right time, like that, then it looks like I got hit, and right now I'm very comfortable. But you see, my point is, if I wanted to punch myself here, like that, like that, and that would look realistic. One of the things that I do that not everybody does is I always add like a little grunt or something to make it realistic, like that, something like that, because that feels realistic and adds a little bit of nuance in the sound department that makes it feel like a real fight. You know, when they've always said when I was a weightlifter and when I was doing martial arts that when you exhale and make a sound, it allows more aggression to come out. So whenever I would compete in weightlifting back in my younger years, we used to, you know, you get kicked out of Planet Fitness for doing grunting, but it actually helps you pick up a heavier weight or throw a harder punch. So that's just part of realism in fights. I would try to do that naturally because I want to survive in any scenario if it was a real fight. So things like that, thinking about the camera angle, where it's not going to go like this because it doesn't look realistic. We have to play to the camera. So we would go like this, or we would turn sideways and go like this. That is how you think about your angles when you're filming these fight scenes to achieve the most realistic look in camera. But before you do any of that, let's actually talk about what camera settings should you use, because that's actually really important to getting that grittier look that you've seen in maybe the Bourne movies and pretty much any action movie, Expendables, or anything else that's in Hollywood. So what you want to do is shoot this with an extremely fast shutter speed. So I usually would do maybe 1/400th of a second on my shutter speed, 1/800th of a second, something like that. Basically push the shutter speed as far as you can go, because that allows the image to look grittier. Why? It depends. The shutter speed has to do with how motion is interpreted in the image. It talks about how fast the shutter clicks in 1 second. So if my shutter speed is 1/400th of a second, that's 1,000 times faster than my hand could move, probably, because I'm a little large and slow. But if we were shooting at, say, 1/50th of a second, that means it goes like this. Now, the slower that the shutter speed is, the more motion blur you have, so any movement starts to look blurry. That's not what we want. We want everything to look crisp and sharp, like we're trying to get a still photo of a sporting event. I'm coming at this person as hard as I can with a punch or a kick or whatever, and I'm trying to get him, so I'm going fast. I want to capture that movement as crisp and clear as possible. So the reason why we shoot at a fast shutter speed is to keep that movement crisp. It makes it look gritty and realistic, and that's what we're going for when we're filming a fight scene, is gritty realism. It's supposed to feel like we're trying to hurt each other, which goes into my next point. When you're doing these, you must act aggressively. You're not actually making contact with the other person, except for some things below the waist, like usually our hits to the stomach, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. But when you're throwing a punch, like you're trying to punch them in the face, you gotta really look like you're coming at them. I see a lot of scenes that look like we're practicing, we're doing this, hi-ya, hi-ya. And it just looks like people are practicing at a martial arts school. It doesn't look like a fight. If you're in a fight and it's supposed to be real, you're coming at, you're really trying to get them. And if you're not going to win. You'll lose. So try to think about how to make this as realistic as possible. Look angry. Look like you're trying to hurt the other person. Come at them with intent and aggression and throw your hands as hard as you can. I have, on several occasions, thrown my shoulder out just throwing a punch because I was trying to do it so hard. When I threw the punch in the video where I hit the house, I bruised my knuckles because that's just part of what happens. So when you have that aggression, when you have the camera settings to making everything sharp, when you take the camera and you have it moving around, we shoot on a shoulder rig. So the camera's a little smooth, it's a little bit more controlled, but we can still add that natural shakiness, that gritty feeling, like, oh, this voyeuristic documentary almost cinematography to it. That all ties together into creating this realistic looking fight scene, which is what you want when you're conveying something like this to your audience. So now let's talk about what you can do as far as hits go. Now, punches to the face, 100% out. Never, ever try to strike somebody in the face. Accidents happen. But I take some of my wrestling knowledge and I use that when I'm doing fight scenes, because hits to the stomach, not so bad. Still, do not hit someone as hard as you can. That's horrible. What we do in wrestling is we kind of pull our punches a little bit when we strike to the abdomen or when we strike to the face. So if we're doing a punch to the stomach, I'll start to throw the punch as hard as I can, and then right before I make contact, I loosen my fist. So I still have the momentum, but it almost turns into like a belly slap. So then when we're hitting to the stomach, it's not as hard. Like, I'm not trying to boom, go like that. It's really just, and it's not a sting, but you'll feel it. It's not too bad, but what it does is help when you have an impact. If you played it through in slow motion, you would probably see my hand start to open, but because it's so fast and we never do that, you won't notice it. Instead, it looks like a legitimate hit. Same thing when we do elbows. I just loosely, really fast, but I pull my elbow back so the impact is not as bad. So I'll throw my elbow and I'll already start to pull it away before I make contact. So it's just like that instead of me following through and really trying to hurt somebody with the elbow. For the kicks to the chest, what you want to do is raise your foot and press it onto their chest first. So you have to be careful with these. When you get your foot slowly touching their chest, then you just shove them with your leg. It's not like I'm cocking my leg back and trying to really kick them in the face or kick them as hard as I can. It's you bring your leg up, you press it against their chest, and then you shove them into wherever you're going, and that makes a realistic looking hit on the chest. So utilizing all of those techniques, whether it's the camera settings, camera movement, how you should perform the fight scenes, how you should strike the person, where to place the camera to make those strikes look real, or any of the other things talked about in this episode, you have learned how to cohesively tell a story through action in a choreographed fight scene. Now, if you're curious about the post-production side of things, whether it be the sound design, the Foley, how to cut the thing together, we're going to be talking about that in another episode, which is great. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, my name is Brandon Ascari of Ascari Digital's Content Creator Academy. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up button, drop a comment down below with any questions, share it to all your friends. As you know, it is my goal to help educate and inspire you to being the best and most successful freelancer you could be. But in the meantime, I will see ya.